Welcome to History Doc. Before we dive into this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button.
All right, today we are diving into one of history's absolute greatest maritime mysteries. This is a real-deal ghost ship story that has been stumping investigators, historians, and storytellers for well over 150 years. Let's get right into it.
So, I want you to picture the scene. It's December of 1872. You're in the middle of the vast, choppy Atlantic Ocean, hundreds of miles from anywhere, and you spot a ship adrift. Her sails are tattered, she's moving erratically, and there's just this eerie silence hanging over her.
And this is where it gets really weird. This is the central haunting question. Because when another ship's crew finally boarded this vessel, they found it was in perfectly good shape, totally sailable. So how on earth did a captain, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and 7 experienced sailors just disappear? That ship, of course, was the Mary Celeste, and its discovery kicked off a mystery that's a wild mix of hard facts and even wilder fiction. So let's take a look at what the rescuers actually found when they stepped on board. The whole scene was just a baffling set of contradictions. All the crew's personal stuff, their chests, their clothes, their valuables, it was all there, untouched, which kind of rules out pirates, right? And yet, the ship's only lifeboat was gone. That suggests a planned, maybe even orderly evacuation. There were no signs of a fight, no struggle, but things were just off. And then you have the cargo, 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol, worth a fortune, and almost all of it was still there. So whatever happened on this ship, it clearly wasn't about theft. But, and you're gonna wanna remember this part, that very same cargo holds the key to the entire mystery. You know how it goes. When you don't have solid answers, legends and wild stories tend to take over. And for over a century, the story of the Mary Celeste got all twisted up by sensationalism, creating this thick fog of myths that we really need to clear away to get to the truth.
Okay, so this is crucial. We have to separate the real ship from the fictional one. I bet you've heard the stories of the Mary Celeste. Notice the name change, with warm food still on the table and pipes still smoking. Yeah, that version, it comes from an 1884 short story by a young Arthur Conan Doyle. You know, the guy who created Sherlock Holmes. The reality of the Mary Celeste was a lot less tidy and, honestly, a whole lot more mysterious. So let's just quickly knock down some of those early theories. Pirates? Nope. They would have taken that valuable cargo. A mutiny? Highly unlikely. The crew was described as top-notch and peaceable, and Captain Briggs was well-respected. And, well, a sea monster? It makes for a great story, but it just doesn't explain why they would calmly lower the lifeboat. The evidence just doesn't fit, not even close. So, if it wasn't pirates or monsters or a mutiny, then what in the world was it? Well, to solve this, we've got to go back to the beginning, look at the evidence, and apply a bit of modern thinking to this very, very cold case. The ship's own timeline gives us a huge clue. It leaves New York, gets battered by rough seas for 2 solid weeks, and then the captain makes his last entry in the ship's log on November 25th. Just 10 days later, it's found abandoned, 400 miles away from that last known position. The real question is, what happened in those 10 days? Modern analysis, particularly from documentarian Anne McGregor, uncovered the first big clue. By digging into historical weather data and cross-referencing it with the ship's log, she figured out that Captain Briggs's chronometer, his key navigational tool, was probably faulty. He thought he was getting close to the Azores, nearing safety, but in reality, he was 120 miles further out to sea. He was lost and way behind schedule. Okay, now add a second major problem to the mix. The ship had recently been carrying coal, and it's very likely that leftover coal dust had clogged up the water pumps. Now, this is critical. It meant that after 2 weeks of getting hammered by storms, Captain Briggs had no way to know for sure how much water was in the hole. He couldn't tell if his own ship was sinking. He was sailing completely blind. So, just imagine, you're a captain, you're lost, and you're not even sure if your ship is staying afloat. That is a bad, bad situation. But is it enough to abandon ship? Not quite. For that, you need a moment of pure, absolute terror. And that brings us right back to the cargo. So, remember those 1,701 barrels? Well, it turns out that 9 of them were made of a porous red oak, which was different from all the others. And during the voyage, they had started to leak, slowly filling the sealed cargo hold with hundreds of gallons of highly flammable alcohol vapor.
Essentially, the ship had become an invisible bomb just waiting to go off. But this, right here, has always been the #1 problem with the explosion theory. The sailors who found the Mary Celeste reported absolutely no charring, no soot, no evidence of any kind of fire. So how could there have been a blast powerful enough to make an entire experienced crew abandon a perfectly good ship?
Well, the answer lies in a really specific kind of blast. It's called a pressure wave explosion. The best analogy is thinking about a chef who flambés a dessert. You get that big whoosh of flame that burns up the alcohol vapor really fast, but it's followed by such cool air that it doesn't even burn the food underneath. It's all flash, no lasting fire.
And hey, this isn't just a theory. Dr. Andrea Sella, a chemist over at University College London, actually recreated these exact conditions in a lab. He built a replica of the ship's hold, filled it with the right amount of vapor, and sparked it. The result? A terrifying fireball that erupted with a ton of force, but left behind absolutely no scorch marks. He proved it could happen. The science totally checks out.
So let's put all of these pieces together. We've got the human element, the mechanical failures, and the chemical reaction. When you combine them, they create the absolute perfect storm of circumstances.
So here is, by far, the most plausible scenario. I want you to put yourself in Captain Briggs' shoes. You're lost. You're unable to tell if your ship is sinking. Then, suddenly, a terrifying blast erupts from the cargo hold, blowing the hatches wide open. You don't see any fire, but you have to assume that the next explosion could be the one that destroys the ship entirely. So the only rational choice is to get everyone, your wife, your little girl, your crew, into the lifeboat, tie a line to the ship, and just trail behind at a safe distance. But in those choppy Atlantic seas, that tow line snaps, and the Mary Celeste, empty but perfectly seaworthy, just sails away on the wind, leaving them all to their fate.
Science and modern forensics have brought us closer than ever to a real answer. It transforms the story of the Mary Celeste from a ghost story into a profound human tragedy, a chain of plausible events and one single fatal moment of bad luck. But, with no bodies ever recovered and no final message left behind, you're still left to wonder, can a case like this ever really, truly be closed?